Entitlement. It's the word that surfaces almost reflexively when the subject of incels comes up. I mean, scroll through any comment section or overhear any casual conversation, and you'll hear this word tossed like a grenade. They are entitled. They think women owe them something. They can't handle rejection. This word is dismissive, it's final. It's as if this one word explains everything. But what if it doesn't? What if what if entitlement isn't the full story, but instead it's only the visible scar of a wound that runs much deeper? Because here's an uncomfortable consideration. Entitlement, I don't think sprouts from arrogance. I think it grows from lack. It's not the product of too much self-love. It's the product of too little love or too little affirmation, of too little being seen and known for who you are. It's a it's the hardened crust that forms over a lifetime of loneliness and of longing and and not being seen, someone's humanity going unnoticed. So imagine with me just for a moment this, if you would. A child growing up in a world where affection is rare, where approval must be earned and love seems or feels conditional, where vulnerability is punished or mocked or even worse, it's ignored. Now this child internalizes something quietly and it's very corrosive. It's this idea that if I am not loved simply for being me, then I must perform to be loved. And so they set out, perhaps not consciously, but they try to be good enough through the course of their life, good enough to earn attention, good enough to feel chosen, good enough to even matter. And maybe they try and they try as hard as they can and they work themselves, they work on themselves, and they chase achievements and they strive for these markers of success and they're that they were told that at some point will make them visible, whether it's by way of status or style or charm or fitness. But despite the effort, despite the accolades and all the check marks, real connection still feels out of reach. And friendships seem shallow, and romantic connections are non existent. And worse, when they do dare to try, they're met with silence or rejection. Now, pause a moment there with me, if you would. Imagine what it must feel like deep in the marrow of your being to extend your hand in hope again and again, only to feel it slapped away, not by cruelty, but by indifference. So you tell yourself, if I do more, I'll be enough. If I fix this part of me, then someone will finally see me. And then over time, the belief begins to shift. Not I'll earn love, now it's I'm owed love, right? Not I'll work to be chosen, now it's they are wrong for not choosing me. Because that story, as flawed as it is, feels safer than confronting the abyss of perceived worthlessness. And this is how entitlement forms. It's not a random defect. It's a defense mechanism. It's it's the mind's way of insulating itself against the unbearable shame of feeling unseen and unchosen. It's not born of strength. It's it's born of desperation. It's this last ditch attempt to make sense of the chronic emotional starvation. And it explains why entitlement can show up so intensely in incel spaces. For many men in these communities, the idea that they are unlovable is too much to bear for them. And so instead, the narrative shifts. It's society that's broken, or it's women who are shallow, it's the world that's unfair. And if the alternative is believing that you're inherently unworthy of love, blaming others feels almost merciful. But let's be clear, understanding this is not the same as excusing it. Entitlement left unchecked, turns corrosive. It morphs from a private sort of a shield into a public weapon, which justifies anger and breeds resentment and eventually spills into hatred and at its extreme expression, violence. And what starts as a protective story now calcifies into this ideology, one that sees relationships not as mutual connections, but as transactions or zero sum games. And the tragedy is that this entitlement pushes away the very intimacy that it was designed to secure. Because connection, like true life giving connection, can't be demanded. It can only be offered or freely and willingly given. The more we clutch at this kind with clenched fists of entitlement, the more it slips through our fingers. So here's the hard part though. We live in a culture that doesn't teach emotional resilience. It teaches instead performance, right? It teaches image keeping. It teaches how to attract attention. But we don't teach how to sustain intimacy. Our culture currently teaches achievement, but not how to sit with loneliness. It teaches competition, but it doesn't teach how to handle rejection without losing a sense of your own worth. And so many grow up believing that if they simply can accumulate enough external markers, enough muscles, for example, enough money, enough social proof, whatever it is, then love will be inevitable. But love is not inevitable. Love is risky. It's uncontrollable. It requires vulnerability, right? And no amount of muscle mass can ever protect you from that. You see, when vulnerability has been punished or ignored or for like a long length of time, entitlement starts to look like a far safer option. Entitlement would say this. Entitlement would say, I shouldn't have to be vulnerable because I've suffered enough. I deserve compensation for my pains. Whereas healing, like real healing, begins when we risk vulnerability again. When we say, I want to be seen, or I long to be chosen, but I can't force it. I can only offer myself honestly and openly. I mean, that's a terrifying prospect. But it's the only road back to true connection. It's the only way to untangle from the longings, from the demand, if you will, the desire from entitlement, or the humanity from the hurt. But let's consider how longing turns to demand, shall we? Longing is one of the most vulnerable forces, I believe, in the human existence. We don't just want love, we are actually aching for it. We don't just want to be seen, we long to be known. And this ache is not weakness. It's the beating heart of what makes us human. But but what happens when that longing goes unmet for years or even decades? What happens when reaching out leads to rejection or worse, even indifference, like over and over and over again? See, something inside starts to shift. Longing, which once made us open and hopeful, begins to harden. Hope starts to feel dangerous, and vulnerability starts to feel foolish. And slowly, a dangerous idea takes root. If being vulnerable only leads to pain, maybe the solution is to stop being vulnerable altogether, right? But here's the catch. We still need connection. I mean, we can't stop needing it. Um, we can't outgrow it. We can't logic our way out of human need to be seen, at least, or to be valued, or to be loved. So if we can't stop needing it, but we risk asking for it, what's left? Demand. Demand is wounded longing with armor on, right? Where longing says, I hope you'll choose me, demand instead says, you should choose me, right? Whereas longing would say, there's space for autonomy of the other here. Demand tries to erase that autonomy. It says, I've suffered enough. I've waited long enough. I have earned this. And this is why entitlement is so seductive and so dangerous. It feels like protection against further hurt. It tells the person, you don't have to risk rejection anymore. You've you've already paid your dues. But what it actually does is it builds this wall between the individual and the very thing that they want the most. Because love, like the real kind of love can't be demanded. It can't be extracted through guilt or anger or expectation. It can only be offered. It can only be offered freely or willingly, offered from a place of choice and not obligation. So imagine standing at the edge of a river, parched for thirst, right? And you see the water glinting in the sunlight and it's just out of reach. But instead of stepping carefully toward it, open-handed, you scream at it to come to you. The river doesn't move. And in your rage, you turn away, declaring that the river was cruel and unfair and evil. But the river wasn't withholding, was it? It was simply just being what it is, a river that flows the way it does. You can only drink from the river if you approach it, if you humble yourself to its flow, if you bend down, hands open, ready to receive, right? Love works in a very similar way. Love doesn't respond to demands, it responds instead to openness. It responds to invitation, to courage. Incel spaces often get stuck in the demand stage, right? I mean, what could have been communities of mutual healing and support? They too often curdle into echo chambers of entitlement, and the conversations shift from how can I heal and connect to why wouldn't women give me what I deserve? And the pain gets repackaged as blame, and longing gets reframed as resentment. And at first glance, like this might look like narcissism or arrogance. But I believe if we look closer, what we'll really find is fear. Fear of being unwanted, fear of being unseen, fear of being unloved. And the tragedy is the very defense mechanisms that are built to shield them from pain become the same bars of the prison that traps them in it as well. So, how do we break this cycle? I think it starts by remembering the original longing underneath all of that demanding. Before the anger, right? Before the resentment, before the entitlement kicked in. See, there was a boy once, maybe 12, maybe 16, I don't know, who wanted nothing more than to be chosen, who wanted to feel like he mattered. A boy who wanted to know that he was not invisible. And that boy, I don't think he wanted power per se. He didn't want control. He wanted to be seen and loved. He wanted to belong. And when longing hardens into demand, it becomes quite brittle. And when demand is unmet, it leads to deeper bitterness, right? And the bitterness that's left unchecked, it really metastasizes into hatred of others and of oneself. But if we can soften that demand, if we can peel back the armor, if you will, if we can only return to the vulnerable, terrifying openness of true longing, then healing becomes possible. And this is not an easy proposition. it's not a comfortable one. This requires facing the original wounds that initiated this whole process. It requires grieving what was never given or experienced. It requires risking vulnerability, maybe for the first time in years. But I believe it's the only path that leads out of loneliness. And the difference between desire and demand, well, let me be clear about this critical distinction here, okay? Desire would say, I long for love, or I hope to be chosen. I'm open to receiving. Whereas demand says, I deserve love, or I expect to be chosen. I'm entitled to receive, right? Desire, it honors the agency of the other person. Whereas demand just outright erases and wipes that out. Desire is courageous because it accepts the risk of rejection potentially. Whereas demand is fearful because it cannot tolerate being told no. Desire would say, I am worthy, and I invite you to see that. Demand says, you must affirm my worth or else, right? And only one of these stances can lead to real connection. Only one of these leaves room for intimacy. And the hard truth is, no one owes us love, right? No one owes us attention. No one owes us any affection. You see, love can't be won like a prize. It can't be claimed like a trophy. It can only be received as a gift. And gifts by their very nature must be given freely, or they stop being gifts at all. Now, I do want to spend some time on what healing looks like beyond entitlement. You see, if entitlement is grief that's wearing armor, then healing begins when we dare to take off that armor. But how do we do that, right? How do you tell someone who's been rejected and overlooked and invisible for years, and maybe even decades, to lay down the very defense that has kept them standing? Well, you don't start by scolding them, I believe. And you don't start by shaming their choices or wherever they're presently at. You start by mourning with them. You see, healing begins with grief, right? Not angry, explosive grief that lashes out at the world, but the quiet and gut-wrenching grief that says, I needed love and I never got it. Or I needed a connection and I only found silence. I longed to be seen and yet I remained like invisible. So mourn what wasn't given, right? Mourn the affection that never came. Mourn the friendships that never formed. Mourn the first dances, the first kisses, the first I love yous that never arrived. Take time to mourn the way you learned to expect rejection. Mourn the hope that you buried so deep that you forgot that it was even there in the first place. Because grief is not weakness. Grief is how we honor what mattered. Grief is how we reclaim the parts of ourselves that we abandoned when the world told us that they were worthless. And until we grieve, we truly can't move forward. Because unacknowledged grief, remember, it turns into resentment. And resentment, as we've seen, turns into entitlement. So once you've spent some time grieving, I think the next step gets even more difficult. You have to reclaim your longing. You have to recognize that wanting love is not pathetic. It is not shameful. It's not proof that something is wrong with you. It's proof that something is right with you. You see, we are wired for connection. We're built to belong. We are designed to know and also to be known. And longing is not the problem. Longing is the way that we have learned to, no, sorry, hiding is the way we've learned to survive in the absence of longing. But healthy longing, here's what it sounds like. It says, I want to be loved, or I hope to be chosen, or I desire connection. So in those statements, there's no entitlement there. There's only an openness, right? There is a courageousness in even voicing them. Because to long openly is to risk disappointment. But it's also to make connection possible as well. So practice. It's going to take a lot of practice. And once you reclaim your longing, the work of practice is also for the receptivity. That word receptivity is really critical. Receptivity means staying open to what comes and not necessarily trying to control it. It means you're allowing yourself to hope without demanding any guarantees. It means that you're offering your presence, your interest, your attention, and you're allowing others the freedom to respond as they choose. Now, this is terrifying, yes, but it's the only soil in which real love can grow. See, you cannot force someone to love you. You cannot argue them into being attractive. You can't guilt anyone into affection. And even if you could, what would it be worth though? See, love that's given under duress is not love at all, is it? That's obligation. That's pity. And you don't want to be tolerated. You don't want to be pitied. What you want, I believe, is to be chosen, like genuinely and freely and authentically, joyfully chosen. And that can only happen if you leave space for someone else to say no, right? But this requires that we work on building our emotional safety first. See, finally healing means that we're building this area of safety emotionally within ourselves. Before you can ever offer real connection to others, you should ask if you've offered it to yourself first. Can you sit with your loneliness without immediately having it turn into anger? Can you acknowledge that you are hurt without needing to project it onto others? Can you see yourself like flaws and all and still say, I am worthy of love? Emotional safety means you don't crumble at the first hint of rejection. It means instead that you can actually hear a no and know that it's not a referendum on your worth. It means that you can stay open even in the face of vulnerability. See, building emotional safety is slow and steady work. It involves therapy, perhaps, reflection, lots of that, support systems. It involves learning to soothe yourself without needing to control others. Um, Further, it involves developing self-respect that doesn't depend on external validation. And perhaps most importantly, it involves patience, right? Healing is not linear. You will have days, for example, where the old entitlement is trying to creep back in. Days when perhaps rejection feels like proof that you're broken, or days when the temptation to lash out or shut down feels overwhelming. And that's okay. Healing is not a straight line. It's a spiral and it's squiggly all over the place. Messy, often confusing, but always worth it. The goal is not to become immune to pain. The goal is to become resilient in the face of pain. To be able to say, um, yes, I am hurt. Yes, I feel unseen, but I'm still worthy of love and I can still offer love without demanding. That is real strength there. Not brittle bravado of entitlement, but this quiet and unshakable confidence of someone who knows their worth and knows that that worth does not depend on someone else's approval. But here's the truth about connection that I think we should consider. And it's probably the secret that no one tells you. The people who form the deepest and most lasting connections, they aren't the ones who demand love. They're the ones who actually offer it. They're the ones who risk vulnerability, right? So they're the ones who stay open when it's hard. And they're the ones who approach others not with entitlement, but with curiosity and with compassion and with courage. And you can be that person. No matter how many years that you've spent in loneliness, no matter like how many walls like you've built, right? No matter how much anger that you've carried, it is possible for you to put down the armor. And in the process, you can reclaim your longing. You can build that emotional safety that you probably have never experienced or had. And in so doing, you can create the possibility of real connection that isn't forced or owed, but instead is freely given. The whole reason we're talking about this is we want to consider what the bridge back to us looks like, because entitlement is not the end of the story. Entitlement is not a life sentence. It's not an identity. It's not who you are. It's what formed your pain, perhaps, yes, and what formed around your pain additionally. And like all armor, though, it can be removed. Carefully, yes. Gently, absolutely. Deliberately, hell yes. But it requires courage, a different kind of courage than the world usually celebrates, right? I'm not talking here about the courage to dominate, nor the courage to perform, but I'm talking about the kind of courage that makes vulnerability accessible, the kind of courage to stay open, the courage to long without demanding. See, this is the path home, I believe, the path back to connection, back to like real belonging. This starts with small and radical steps. So firstly, see yourself clearly. Start by seeing the wounded places without shaming those spaces. Acknowledge the pain in the midst of that, right? Acknowledge the anger. Acknowledge the fear, if you would. Name those losses that you've endured. Name the dreams that still flicker quietly in the corners of your heart. See yourself not as a failure, not as a villain, but as someone who has survived rejection, right? Survived invisibility, survived like this world that often doesn't know how to handle sensitive, longing hearts. See, you are not broken, my dear listener. You're not beyond repair. You are in progress, as I am, as we all are. And then secondly, stay soft. This this will feel counterintuitive, especially if you've spent years hardening yourself against pain. But healing requires softness, right? Softness towards yourself, um, softness towards others, softness towards the possibility of connection. See, staying soft means refusing to let bitterness calcify your heart. It means that you're choosing curiosity over cynicism. It means you're allowing yourself to hope, not naively, but courageously, bravely. Softness is not weakness. Softness is a strength that has nothing left to prove. And then thirdly, offer what it is that you're longing for. So if you long for kindness, offer it. If you long for understanding, practice that for yourself. If you long to be seen, then truly learn to see others. You see, what we withhold from the world also tends to withhold from us. But what we often give, we receive. So We don't always receive it immediately, perhaps, or perfectly, but often enough to change the dynamic. And the bridge back to us is not built by demanding love, right? It's instead built by becoming the kind of person who can receive and offer freely. And then, fourthly, make peace with receiving a no. You see, not everyone will see you, not everyone will choose you, not everyone will respond to your openness with kindness. And that is not a reflection of your worth by any means. It's a reflection of their readiness, perhaps, right? It's a reflection of their capacity, a reflection of their wounds and walls that they put up. So learning to accept and hear a no without collapsing, without retaliating, without turning inward on yourself and in harshness, this is one of the greatest emotional skills a person can build. This is the very thing that frees us from this cycle of entitlement. This is what makes true connection possible. Because when you can survive receiving a no, then you're finally ready to experience a real and authentic yes. A yes that is not coerced. A yes that is not obligated, right? A yes that lives in the the free and joyful areas in which it's given. And that kind of a yes, that kind of a love, that kind of an acceptance, that kind of a connection, that is worth all the risk. See the bridge back to us? This is how we get on it. You don't have to stay trapped in the storyline or the narrative of entitlements. You don't have to carry the bitterness forever. You don't have to let resentments write the rest of your story. You can grieve. Please do. You can heal. It's possible. You can soften. It's courageous. You can open up and slowly, perhaps painfully in the beginning, but surely it's possible that you can build that bridge back, a bridge back to your heart, a bridge back to the heart of others, a bridge back to the kind of belonging that is not based on performance or demand or desperation. It's this belonging that sees you, like sees all of you, and still chooses you with free, joyful enthusiasm. Consider this last reflection with me. If you take nothing from this conversation, but one thing, let it be this. You are not broken because you long for love. You're not broken because you feel invisible. You are not you're not broken because connection has been hard for you. You are human. And every human heart, no matter how bruised, no matter how hardened it might be, it can find its way home. And it won't be through force, right? It's not going to be through manipulation or intimidation and not through demand. It won't be through entitlement either. But what it will be through, though, is through courage. It'll be through softness. It'll be through openness. And it'll be through this fierce and fragile act of hoping again. So if you find yourself tempted to believe that the world owes you love, pause and breathe. And remember that love, real love, cannot be owed. Real love must be offered, and it can only be received. And you're still capable of offering it. And yes, you're still worthy of receiving it as well. The bridge back to us is waiting, right? Let's start walking towards it together, shall we? You got this.